Be aware, TV licensing officers are employing a new strategy, and I don't like it. I think it's wrong. I think it's breaking the law. I think it's worth a complaint, and it might even be worth suing them for breach of data protection, because I think this is really bad. So what happened? Well, while I tell you what happened, please subscribe to the channel. I always ask. I'm always grateful. What happened? So one of my viewers wrote into me. She sent me a video, but I've yet to get permission to use it. So she sent me a video of this, so I'll tell you what happened. She's got one of these doors with the glass panels in so you can see through to the other side. She got a knock at the door. She went to the door. She looked through, said, "Who are you and what do you want?" There was no answer at first, but then the guy on the other side of the door said, "Got you." And she said, "What?" Looking very confused and a little alarmed. He said, "Too late. You're on camera. I've got a picture of you." And then she rushed upstairs, got her phone, took a video of him leaving and got a good picture of his face, his vehicle, the registration plate, etc. And he left behind one of these TV license letters. The letter said that they'll be back again if she hasn't paid for the license by then. Now, to me, this is utterly unacceptable. My viewer is in her 60s, and neither she nor anyone else should expect TV licensing, or any other company for that matter, coming to your front door and taking a photograph of you through your front door. Now, this shouldn't really need explaining, much less from a barrister, but this shouldn't need explaining that you are in private property. Now, if you are out and about in a public place, you don't have an automatic right of privacy. Now, there's a reasonable expectation of privacy in certain places. Now, in your own home, you absolutely have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your own home. Now, being the lawyer, the counter-argument might be, well, aha, you've got a front door with glass panels on it and we can see through the front door. But that's a stupid argument, and you know it. But that doesn't excuse anyone taking a photograph of you through the glass panels in your own home. Now, to get a little bit technical about it, look at the law, which is what I do on this channel. Done that almost every day for 5 years now. We look at the law and we say, well, data protection principles are at play here because a person's photograph of their face is personal data because they are an identifiable individual and they are identifiable by the photograph. So that becomes personal data. Taking someone's photograph is personal data. And so for companies and organizations that have this duty to comply with the Data Protection Act, if they take a photograph of someone through their front door in their own home, they are gathering and processing their data. And there's a lot of principles at play here. One of them is data minimization. So they have to minimize the data that they collect on any individual. They would certainly have to justify why they've taken this photograph of this person. And in their own home, I mean, even if you said that it was through a window, they were watching the TV, they caught them in the act watching TV, that might almost justify, I say almost, I don't think it justifies. It might almost justify taking the photograph if it proved that they were watching live TV without a TV license. But even then, my counter argument to myself there is that in order to take a photograph through a window, they would have to walk around somewhere not the front door and look through the window and take a photograph through the window. So there is no implied right of access to walk up to a window. People have asked me this before. They can't walk around the house and find some window to look through. They have no implied right of access to walk on the front lawn, the rear lawn, the side lawn, or whatever else to look through a window. And even if they did, is it really justified to take a photograph through the window of a person watching TV? No, it's their own private home. They can only really intrude upon their privacy if they have a warrant. Now, that is absolutely unacceptable. I'm going to reply to this lady, and I might suggest that I write to TV licensing pro bono on her behalf, making a complaint under data protection. So I'll say no more about it, other than I think it's wrong. And that's not the only complaint we've had just recently either. There's another few tactics in the form of letters. Now, we've all seen these letters, and we've seen various iterations of these letters, and they get worse, and some of them are flat out wrong, some of them are misleading. And in this one, in my view, it is misleading and it's bordering harassment as well. And I think it's only a matter of time, when not if, that someone actually brings a case in harassment against TV licensing. Maybe someone ought to crowdfund it, and maybe I'll chip in some free advice along the way as well to support that. But let's take a look at this, shall we? Because I think this is certainly bordering on harassment, if not crossing over into the territory of harassment, which is sort of behavior that a person of reasonable firmness should not be expected to bear in an ordinary civilized society. So let's take a look at this. This was to a student. It said, Don't risk prosecution. Act now. An investigation has been opened into the student accommodation address, which, by the way, the student that emailed me this only happened to see it by chance because the TV licensing officer just dumped a whole pile of them at the front of the building, which obviously contained multiple flats, of which one of which was my student viewers. And it says, you haven't contacted us since we last wrote to you. Our records show that this is still not covered by a TV license. It's a criminal offence to watch or record live TV without a license on any device, which happens to be true, but that's not the point. It then goes on to say this includes all TV channels, pay TV services like Sky, and live TV on streaming services like Amazon Prime Video. You also need a TV license to be covered for everything on BBC iPlayer, which is, of course, wrong, because BBC content on BBC iPlayer, yes, but it does not include S4C. So when it says you need a TV license to be covered for everything on BBC iPlayer, if, for example, the only thing on BBC iPlayer that the student or anybody else watched was S4C, this statement is wrong. Thus, it's a whole lot of things, really. This is menaces, i.e. we will prosecute you if you don't have a license and watch something on BBC iPlayer because it says you need a license to be covered for everything on BBC iPlayer. That is wrong. So this might even make that a false representation with a view to make a gain to someone or a loss to someone else. Sometimes we call that fraud because this is a misrepresentation. It says you also need a TV license to be covered for everything on BBC iPlayer. Now, you do not need a TV license to be covered for S4C. Now, most of the time that they say this, there's a little asterisk and they refer somewhere else and says not for S4C, but it doesn't say it here. And then it goes on. Ignoring this letter could lead to prosecution. Our officers visit the address any time of day, night, evening, weekends, etc. If we find evidence that you've been watching, recording, or downloading TV illegally at this address, you'll be interviewed under caution in accordance with national criminal law, etc. You'll be prosecuted, you could be fined, etc. But then there's another variation of this letter, which I think takes this perhaps even a step further. This one from another review of mine said, your no license needed status expired at the end of September 2025. Now, just to be clear, there is no expiration date on this thing. It's a voluntary statement or declaration form filling exercise on TV license website where you say, I don't need a license. I don't do this, I don't do that, I don't need a license. Now, there is a questionnaire, which I'm going to come back to in a minute, which is also a little bit misleading, but there's no expiration date to this. It's a voluntary process. It's not a legal mandatory requirement to fill this form in. You just do it and it shuts them up for a bit, because if you genuinely don't need a TV license, then you fill the form in, you tell them so, and you get a no license needed status. It shouldn't expire. It's just a voluntary service that helps to shut them up for a while. Now, it says, act now to avoid breaking the law. Now, there is not necessarily any requirement to act now, because if the viewer that submitted this in the first place, status hasn't changed, and they don't watch or record live TV or watch BBC content on BBC iPlayer, on any channel, on any device from anywhere in the world, if they don't do any of those things, they don't need a TV license. So they don't need to act now to avoid breaking the law. They could do nothing other than what they're already doing. If they only watch Netflix and none of the live stuff that ever comes out on Netflix, I've never seen any live stuff myself, but I read somewhere that there was some big fight or something that was on Netflix, whatever. But if you don't do any of those things, you don't need a TV license. Then it went on to say, this means we may have to investigate. And an officer could visit to check if you're watching TV without a license. Not without a warrant, they can't, because you don't have to let them in. Anyone caught doing this risks prosecution, which is true. It is an offence not to have a license if you watch or record live TV. And then it says you must buy a TV license or claim no license needed to avoid further action. That is plainly not true, because you do not have to buy a TV license if you don't need one, and you do not have to file this no license needed form if you don't want to avoid further action. Now, this is a blatant threat of action without any real justification whatsoever, other than they are just doing their job trying to get people to be lawfully licensed if they need a license. Then it goes on to say it's against the law to watch or record live TV, which is true, on any device, which is true. This includes all TV channels. It doesn't include those pay-on-demand channels, so I don't quite agree with that. Pay TV services like Sky, etc. And again, the same statement as before, everything on BBC iPlayer, which again, in my view, is false. And then it gives you a plain choice, buy a license or claim no license needed. Now, many of you will just say, well, just fill the form in. They go away for a year or so. It's, no trouble or whatever. But do you really want to have to do this every single year? If you've done it for so many years or whatever, and your status hasn't changed, you shouldn't really have to do this form all the time. But again, this is the email that comes out when you don't do that from another viewer. You must buy a TV license to be covered for everything on BBC iPlayer, which is false. It doesn't cover S4C. Watch record live TV, yes. Watch record live TV on pay service, yes. Watch live TV on streaming services like YouTube, etc. This is where a lot of people get caught out, is if they are watching live stuff on YouTube, then it has to have a license for that as well. A license is your must-have pass to over 400 TV channels, etc. But then we come to the declaration sent to me by another viewer, because another viewer filled this in. And I think it's misleading and I think it's wrong. I think the answer is wrong. The conclusion is it says you need a license, funnily enough, but I think it's wrong because it says complete this form. So this is tweaked and changed over the years, but let's have a very quick look through this to see what the answers are. Do you or does anyone in your household ever watch TV on any channel? No, my viewer said. Do you or anyone in your household ever watch TV on any TV service? No, my viewer said. Do you or does anyone in your household ever watch TV live on any streaming service? No, my viewer said. Do you or anyone in the household ever watch foreign channels? No. And then 5 and 6, I think, are the reason it said you need a license, which I'll give you a reason why this might be wrong. 5 says, can you confirm that you and your household never watch BBC iPlayer? Viewer said no. Well, maybe they watch S4C, so they do use iPlayer. Maybe. They didn't say so. That's just a possibility. Question 6, can you confirm that you and your household never record TV, for example, on Sky, etc.? Well, if you are saving a program, I don't do this myself, but presumably if you're saving a program on pay on demand, where you can download it to watch whenever you want it or whatever, that could amount to recording TV. But where this would attract a license, of course, is if you are recording live TV. But it doesn't say live here. So again, I think it's misleading, but unsurprisingly, it says you need a license. So overall, I think that's confusing. But the big one that concerns me is the photograph through the front door of my viewer, because I think that's wrong. I'm going to at least encourage her to make a complaint and perhaps offer some pro bono assistance as well. Now, this is not legal advice to anybody, but I believe that that is wrong. I believe that that is in breach of data protection because it is not necessary to take a photograph because it's really of no evidential value other than that she's in the house. Doesn't prove anything, in fact. Doesn't prove she owns the house, doesn't prove she lives there, certainly doesn't prove that she watches or records any live TV or uses TV at all. For all they know, she doesn't own a TV, and yet they're taking a photograph of her through her front door because she doesn't have a TV license. TV licensing, this is not cool. It's not acceptable. We won't have it, and people will stand up against this. And with the likes of me offering this assistance where I feel it's my civic duty to assist somebody, I am best placed to do that, and I will do that. So this is not acceptable. People won't stand for it. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. I think that's disgraceful. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.